What is the limit to the kind of stuff that you can get secondhand? Can you get food secondhand too? Well, you definitely can. The extent to which I eat secondhand food currently is by finishing my toddler's food on her dish every night to avoid food waste. But if this is something that you want to look into more deeply, then let's get into it. So first, what exactly am I referring to when I'm saying secondhand food? Well, I'm pretty sure that I came up with that term. Really, I'm talking about food that's not going to be eaten unless you do. So if you don't eat it, it's going to end up rotting in the dump. So this is food that's left sitting in a field after a harvest, food that's too ugly to be purchased by grocery stores, food that hasn't been sold in time and is discarded by stores and restaurants. So there's no need for that food to go to waste. I like to call these secondhand food options because the food belonged to somebody else who didn't want it, so you come and you get it and you eat it. So let's talk about how to avoid food waste in this specific context. So let's start at the beginning. You have to grow the food, right? So after farmers harvest their fields, many crops that aren't pretty enough to sell or crops that simply weren't picked up properly by machines are left behind to rot. And the act of gleaning is to go to those fields and harvest what's been left over. So many organizations host gleaning events, but the Society of St. Andrews does this most notably. They're a group that I had the pleasure of connecting with during my time working in food insecurity and working with supporting local farmers in North Carolina. And every year they have up to 40,000 volunteers across the states that go salvage this food in farmers' fields. And in 2018 alone, their gleaning network distributed over 16 million pounds of fresh produce to the needy directly or to food kitchens. So if you want to glean a field for yourself or for folks in your community, then that's definitely a possibility. Another way to fight food waste and eat food that would otherwise be thrown out is by supporting produce that is not perfect. So once farmers harvested their crops, they'll go through a sorting process where perfectly good food that just doesn't look perfect is chucked out and never sold. So there's a way to avoid this food waste. Imperfect Produce is a fantastic organization co-founded by Ben Simon, who I had the pleasure of getting to know a decade ago now when he was first getting started in fighting food waste. And what Imperfect Produce does, they help customers buy ugly produce that can't be sold in grocery stores because of their ridiculous standards and would otherwise just be discarded. So Ben's company has been a booming success. They've expanded to 29 cities in just 4 years, and 50 million pounds of fresh produce has been recovered. So I got super excited to see a lot of zero wasters talking about getting their ugly produce delivered straight to their door through Imperfect Produce. So you can definitely go check out their website to see if they offer fresh produce delivery where you live. There's also Hungry Harvest that does this. Those last two examples were about avoiding food waste before food is even sold. The next examples are about avoiding food waste once your food is placed for sale but doesn't get sold. What I appreciate in certain grocery stores is that they'll place produce that's going bad on special discounted shelves for you to take. So I try to purchase from that shelf whenever possible, even if it's wrapped in plastic, because that plastic is gonna end up in the trash regardless at that point. Another thing that I like to do is sometimes there are deep discounts on vegan yogurts that are about to go bad. So I will buy that yogurt even if it's in plastic, because at the end of the day, it will be wasted if I don't buy it. So if it's too late and that food is taken off the shelf, there's different places that it might go. If the store is not involved in any food recovery program, then they will chuck that food right into the dumpster, and that's where dumpster diving comes in. So dumpster diving is when you salvage, or in this case, you salvage food from dumpsters or containers outside of malls or restaurants, for example. So you'd be surprised what kind of good quality food you can find in dumpsters outside of restaurants or cafes. Before taking the dive, make sure you're aware of all the laws where you live. It may be considered theft. You can be charged with trespassing if the dumpsters are on a private property. In Belgium, an environmental activist was detained for a month for salvaging food from a dumpster. There's a lot higher chance of food poisoning if you decide to do this, so please educate yourself more on this and be smart before considering it. But for some great inspiration on dumpster diving, you can check out the video that I'm linking to Rob Greenfield's experience. So let's say the grocery store or restaurant was thoughtful and actually allowed organizations to come pick up the food. So most of this food typically goes to soup kitchens. Ben Simon, who I mentioned earlier, started Imperfect Produce. He was also the co-founder of the Food Recovery Network in DC. So they salvage cooked foods from campus cafeterias around the United States, and the students, volunteers, pile all the food in their cars, and within 1 hour of pickup, the food is delivered to food kitchens where it's served up. So it's an amazing initiative. If you're still in college and you want to join a chapter or start a chapter of a food recovery network, then it's an awesome idea. Most food recovery programs offer the food strictly to families in need, but there are some places that make this unsold food available to the general public too. So in Basel, there is a group called Backwaren Outlet, or Baked Goods Outlet. Every single day they get fresh food like bread, sandwiches, desserts, and delicacies that weren't sold at local bakery shops the day prior. So their food is seriously delicious, and in the evening before closing, folks who are in difficult financial situations can come get the leftovers for free. Another possibility to get secondhand food here in the city is by checking out food sharing centers. So there are actually 6 of these centers in Basel, whereas in Geneva, where I'm from, there are none at all. So it varies from city to city, but the idea is that if you have too much perishable food in your fridge before going on a weekend trip or on a vacation, for example, then you put your food in these food sharing centers, and then it gets picked up by whoever checks out the food, on the shelves or in the fridge. And then you can also put non-perishables in there that you're not going to eat, and it's just a great place to look for food that would otherwise just be wasted. In Michigan, where my partner Dakota's from, there's actually a store called Blue Night where you can buy food that can't be sold at a regular grocery store anymore. The food there is ridiculously cheap, and what's interesting about it is that the food is often past the expiration date, which I didn't know was legal. So of course, expiration dates don't mean much, and the food is still good like the overwhelming majority of the time. But until going to the store, I actually didn't know that it was legal to sell expired food. So you can get sweets, meats, drinks, pizzas, loads of canned and frozen food, and there's just a giant variety that's extremely cheap, and they just salvage food that would otherwise just end up at the dump. The closest thing that I've seen to this is how Marshalls sells food that is like bashed up or wasn't sold for some reason. So basically Blue Night is Marshalls times like 1,000. So if you're interested in going all out and also getting your food secondhand, I hope that you'll look into gleaning, dumpster diving, buying ugly food or food nearing the expiration date, food sharing, and more. Christina had the very special opportunity of interviewing Palmiro Ocampo, who is a Peruvian haute cuisine chef. In his time studying and working as a chef, he became increasingly concerned about the food waste generated in his high cuisine industry, so he decided to shake things up. He decided that he wanted to salvage produce that was headed to the dump and to make sure in his kitchen that no food scraps go to waste. Here's his interview with Christina.